All right, today we are diving into one of the most ruthless and, honestly, one of the most misunderstood principles of power. We're talking Law 15, crush your enemy totally. Now, I know it's a phrase designed to shock you, but what's the real strategic wisdom hiding under that brutal surface? Let's find out. That's a pretty intense statement, right? But it holds a brutal strategic truth. According to this law, the whole idea that a partial victory is a win, well, that's a dangerous illusion. In fact, it often just sets the stage for your own downfall. So why is leaving an enemy with anything at all considered the first step toward your own defeat? Think about it. A rival left with resources or influence or even just their pride doesn't just disappear. Nope, they retreat, they study your methods, they replay every move, and they wait. They wait for you to make a mistake. And in doing so, they evolve into a more patient, more calculating, and a far more dangerous opponent. And now, their number one mission is your downfall. So, leaving a conflict unresolved isn't just messy, it's a massive strategic blunder. And this isn't about being a pessimist, it's about understanding the cold, hard mechanics of human nature and power. You see, when you defeat an enemy but don't finish the job, they aren't just beaten, you've actually equipped them with powerful new assets. The memory of that humiliation, that fuels an obsessive desire for revenge. You've given them time to rebuild their strength, and crucially, you've given them a free lesson. They've learned from the very failure you handed them, and you can be sure they won't make the same mistake twice. So this brings us to the very core of Law 15. The solution isn't just to, win harder. It's about completely reframing the goal of the conflict itself. And that goal is what strategists call total neutralization. Now, this concept isn't about physical destruction. It's about strategic closure. Total neutralization just means completely removing an opponent's capacity to be a threat. That capacity could be financial, it could be their reputation, their network, or even psychological. The goal here is to end the game, not just score a point. And this really highlights a crucial difference. Crushing an enemy, in this strategic sense, isn't about cruelty. It's about finality. It's not about temporary suppression, but creating an irreversible advantage. The ultimate goal is to create a stable, predictable environment where that specific threat can never, ever pop up again. And this is not a new idea. Not at all. This principle of total resolution has been a cornerstone of strategy for centuries. You see it on ancient battlefields, and you see it in modern boardrooms. The pattern is truly timeless. I mean, the pattern is just so clear throughout history. Sun Tzu taught that winning a single battle was useless if the enemy's supply lines and morale were still intact, because they would just fight again. Machiavelli warned rulers that any rivals left alive would inevitably plot coups. And today, dominant corporations don't just outperform startups, they acquire them or suffocate them to eliminate the threat before it even grows. Machiavelli just absolutely nailed the psychology here. Giving an enemy a small wound only makes them angry and more determined. But a total structural defeat, that removes their ability to act on that anger. It's a cold, but you have to admit, very logical assessment of risk. And in the corporate world, this law is basically practiced every single day. A huge company will identify a rising competitor, and instead of just competing fairly, it will use its massive resources to neutralize it. We're talking acquisitions, aggressive price wars, or locking down suppliers and patents. The goal isn't to get more market share, it's market elimination. Okay, so ancient warfare, corporate takeovers, how does any of this high-level strategic thinking apply to our everyday lives? Well, it's less about literal enemies and more about resolving conflicts and challenges completely. Think about the workplace. We often aim for these short-term wins, right? Like getting a promotion over a colleague. But Law 15 suggests a much deeper strategy. True victory isn't just winning one little battle. It's about making yourself structurally indispensable. You do this by controlling key information, building unique skills nobody else has, and forming deep alliances. You neutralize the very possibility of a rivalry, because when you're essential, opponents simply have no ground to stand on. But this law is a two-way street. It is just as crucial to recognize the signs when someone might be trying to strategically neutralize you. If you start noticing these things happening, they're rarely isolated incidents. A gradual isolation from your professional network, subtle attacks on your reputation, or being consistently left out of key meetings. These are all hallmarks of a coordinated effort to reduce your influence and remove you as a threat. And this isn't just for the office. In our personal lives, this law really translates to ending those recurring negative cycles. Think of a toxic relationship or a bad habit you just can't shake. Half measures, like, taking a short break or making one small change, they almost always fail because the root problem is still there. This principle suggests that only total resolution, through clear, irreversible boundaries and decisive action, can bring real, long-term peace. Now, it is really easy to dismiss this law as just plain ruthless. But if you look deeper, you see that, at its core, it's a cold, analytical tool for managing risk. An incomplete conflict leaves behind all this lingering hostility and strategic instability. It forces you to constantly be looking over your shoulder. Total resolution, on the other hand, creates security and a predictable environment. It's about eliminating the ongoing stress of hidden opposition so you can achieve a true strategic peace. So you can see the application here is really broad. In business, it's about structural dominance. For a leader, it's about removing the internal resistance that could destabilize the whole team. And in our own lives, it's about decisively ending those negative patterns that hold us back. So the crucial point is this: stability requires finality. Every enemy you leave half defeated, every problem you leave half solved, becomes a ticking time bomb of delayed risk. You haven't actually won, you've just postponed the next and probably more difficult battle. Ultimately, this law forces us to confront the long-term consequences of our actions. It makes a really stark argument. In the high-stakes games of power, mercy without strategy is a liability, and a temporary victory can create a permanent and far more dangerous enemy.